So I think that most people can agree that there were definitely people, the church, the empire, same thing there, Roman Empire, and then many people along the way that, even, your Pharisee types that would have had an absolute interest in destroying as much evidence as possible having to do with the apostles. Yet it's so strange, right? Because you have all these writings from them, and then you have ones they definitely wanted to bury and destroy, like Mary Magdalene's, especially the first 6 pages, just so strange. And yet people have argued this, but here's my biggest, this is an argument nobody's heard. Everybody loves to say, and I think the Catholic Church loves for people to run with this idea that Mary Magdalene and Jesus got married. No. But I wonder if Mary Magdalene and Apostle John did after Jesus. See, there's different stories surrounding it, okay? So and the reason these two are particularly special is because they were the only two that followed Jesus from early on, that stayed with him through the crucifixion. The rest of all the other apostles fled during the crucifixion. So they were really the only 2 witnesses. Now, of course, the Catholic Church, because they'll do everything to drown out Mary Magdalene, they go out of their way to do it, okay? They'll say, no, there was other women. It was mostly family, okay? Cousins, okay? But as far as apostles that were not related to Jesus, these were the only 2 that truly witnessed it from beginning to end. I understand the other 11 apostles went on because Jesus picked those 12. But they couldn't kill John. And it's obvious why they couldn't kill him. It's because John actually believed Jesus before seeing him resurrected. He believed without seeing. Like, he saw enough to know, no, I'm not going to fear and run. He was the oldest, or the youngest apostle. The oldest was 30, they believe was possibly 30 or 33, which would have been the closest to the same age as Jesus. The rest of them were like 19, 20, 23, 24, 25, in that area. Mary Magdalene is believed to be in her early 20s, and John maybe 19. And yet they couldn't kill John. It's obvious why, because they tried 3 times. They tried to poison him. They tried to put him in hot oil, and he came up fine. And then they were hoping he'd die on Patmos, and he didn't. So they finally just released him, and then he died in his sleep a few years later at like 100 AD. And he would have been somewhere between 93 and 100 at that point, age-wise. They couldn't. They tried over and over again to kill him 3 times. They couldn't. So God blessed him with a special gift. Everybody, knows this. Well, some people do. Clearly they did. Likely Mary Magdalene, even though she probably wasn't being as persecuted because she wasn't one of the 12 picked, she likely had gifts too, like his, because it's obvious in every way that the reason Jesus spared them, or especially John, because John was picked in the 12, like he went on to be martyred, but not martyred to death. And remember, he was the son of thunder. That's important, but I'll get to that in a minute. So I wonder if they possibly, because of the differentiating stories, and there shouldn't be, it's, the church has done everything to put their own spin on it, because because I think it makes sense, because what the different accounts are that because Jesus, while he was on the cross, entrusted John to take care of Mother Mary, I was under the impression they traveled together to Ephesus, all 3 of them. No, there's other accounts that say that Mary Magdalene stayed with Mother Mary, and that would make more sense. And after Mother Mary died, they believe somewhere between 40 and 43. Up anywhere from 5 to 15 years after Jesus, she passed. But then she went to Ephesus to find John, and then they ministered together. So it would only make sense that they likely, given that they were young, given that Jesus, even though the church loves to make every woman that was around Jesus some virgin, okay? And then you have Europe that, said, oh, she just died in some cave somewhere as a recluse. No, they really, the reason they really didn't want anybody knowing anything about her is because, again, Jesus was bringing women back up to equal status. The Catholic Church showed they wanted nothing to do with God because they didn't understand the simple fact that unless you bring woman and man up to equal status in union, then you're not in union with God, okay? Because that's how it was in the garden. But that's a church that doesn't know God. It serves itself, while people continue to follow it. So this would make sense to me, which means they likely would have had kids. Again, I understand I think someday they'll be of it. I really do. Because I think that God will not tolerate that church much longer. Or all of the people that have wanted to deny so many truths because they've misled so many people. I think God's done with it. God's done with the nonsense. So it would make sense, too, that she would stay with Mother Mary, okay? Because Mother Mary was older. And he had to travel, right? Because he was one of the 12. So then after Mother Mary is passed, of course she would go to meet him. They would have a special bond anyway. They both stayed at the cross. They both saw the whole... That's the biggest thing. And given that they couldn't kill him, and he was considered the son of thunder, then you have to wonder, did they come together? Because it would only make sense by the time, let's figure they're both 20 at the time Jesus dies, okay? Or, is crucified and then resurrects, okay, and all that. And then you figure 15 years after, or anywhere from 5 to 15 years, Mother Mary dies. She would be maybe 30. She could have been younger too. It's obvious they destroyed so much because they didn't want anybody to put anything together. And instead people love to run, because the people that want to destroy Christianity love to say that she had children with Jesus. No, but I bet you she did with John. I bet you they did, because they were still both young. There would be no reason Jesus would be against it either. Jesus said this, he was most loved, and he definitely loved Mary Magdalene because he knew both of them believed in him before he came back resurrected. So that meant everything to God. That's why they weren't allowed to kill him. Yet he started out as one of these sons of thunder. And he grew very much so, but he was the longest living apostle. And he gave us the last book of the Bible, and I think probably the most accurate of knowing Jesus, which is why they so much destroyed her account. But see, the one thing they wouldn't want you to know is that, well, if these two did get married and have children, then that gift likely traveled on. Maybe the son of thunder traveled on. I'm just calling it that because that's what Jesus called John and his brother at one time. But his brother fled the crucifixion. John stayed. But what's so ironic, if you really look at it, is there's another family name that's associated, in my opinion, with thunder. The MacLeods. And there's no historical evidence. It's just the movie is always, the Highlander movies and the TV show, it's always a MacLeod. Always a MacLeod. And thunder. And they couldn't kill Donald Trump no matter how many times they try. And he just happens to be a MacLeod. I don't know, I guess I have a creative imagination, but makes more sense than much of what this world tells everyone.